If you're an inventor or an entrepreneur or a product marketer, listen to this podcast interview with our expert copywriter here at Harvest Growth that's going to give you advice on how to write great content, powerful copy for your website, for social media posts, for videos, everything you need to market yourself and your business better. Today, I'm excited to have on our Harvest Growth podcast, one of our favorite employees, Joybeth Sullivan, who is our content writer at Harvest Growth. Let me do a quick introduction, and then she's going to take over and actually work through a lot of content advice. So if you are, whether you're a content writer, a marketer, on social media, a video editor, producer, marketer, et cetera, anything in the field of marketing, content is king. And Joybeth is really a master at it. And she's going to share some great ideas and strategies that can help you with your content writing, whether it's blog posts, social media posts, video scripts, et cetera. So she's going to go through a lot of really valuable information on this podcast interview. But first, let me do a quick introduction. So she's been with us for a while as our content writer at Harvest Growth, as I mentioned, which is an internal and external role. What that means is she does almost all of the content writing for Harvest Growth for our company. So as we post out to Facebook, Instagram, et cetera, most of that writing you're going to see is right from Joybeth, as well as email follow-ups, automatic emails, that kind of thing. And then she also does external, we call it, but dealing with client content. So similarly, it might be organic social media posts, video scripts, et cetera. So her role is truly all about content. She comes to us with a lot of great experience from doing buying guides, how-to guides, real product focus, which is great for us, certainly as a company, and for many of you as listeners who are product marketers, having written for AutoWise, Gear Junkie, Gear Hungry, Improv, major online publications. She's got some great experience from there. One of the things that got us really excited as a company, bringing on Joybeth originally, was her double major in English and film. So, it couldn't be more perfect, I think, for Harvest Growth. So hopefully she stays with us for a long time, because it really, it's that's what we do is English. It's kind of that writing side. We do a lot of writing here at Harvest Growth, of course, but a lot of it's writing for video or for organic social media, et cetera. But then that film background is so important. So she gets it, right? So she's got great product experience that she'll share with you today from her background, but also what she's done here, as well as that, her schooling that's been so helpful for us. In her own time, she's also a creative writer. I find this interesting. She won the 2020 Virginia Rucker Poetry Prize. Joybeth, I've got to ask you, because I am a poetry novice. I will tell you, it's the one standardized test that I absolutely failed in high school, prepping for college. Long story short, I don't know why I even took it. It was one of the colleges I applied for. I had to take two tests. But when I sat, they gave me three choices. And so I'm like, I'll do poetry. That sounds easy. And I completely bombed it. So I am no poet. Right. What is that? How did you win that Virginia Rucker Poetry Prize?
So I wrote a poem that was for a creative writing class that I took when I was in college. And that was a class that was actually all about walking and writing, the art of walking, like talking about what it means to be walking and talking about all of that stuff. And so I was assigned to write a poem about a pilgrimage, and I decided to write a poem about kind of making my 22nd birthday a pilgrimage. And so I wrote that poem on the day of my birthday, and then I submitted it for this poetry prize and I won it. And it was really awesome because that was I've been writing poetry, since I was young. And so that was the first time that I kind of got a recognition for it. And poetry that's kind of my favorite form of creative writing. I've tried to write narrative and short stories, and maybe one day I will, but that's my on the side when I'm doing creative writing, poetry is my favorite thing. But I totally understand poetry is a little bit confusing, and I don't know. There's a lot of poetry still for me that I still am I don't fully understand that, but I love it.
Well, it's funny. So as you know, and especially in infomercial script writing, oftentimes there's a lot of rhymes, right? So when we're going for that cheesy, if it's a gadget, as seen on TV type product, which isn't a fit for everybody, but for some products. So I can rhyme. I can't write poetry. I think they're very different, but we'll have to take that expertise and get you to involve more rhyming in our funny spots too. That's good to know.
I can see how poetry in some strange ways actually can translate to, all forms of writing, because with poetry, you write in stanzas most of the time. And so you kind of do a thing where it's the whole part is really important and it makes sense all together, but then the little stanzas need to stand alone. So that can kind of translate into writing about products and doing social media posts and making a Facebook campaign where you're writing all these different things, but at the end of the day, they all have the same message. So that's what I love about writing is like you can figure out ways for it to all connect and incorporate in every single different writing thing that you do.
For sure. Now, some of our listeners would not consider themselves copywriters, even though we really all are, right? Whether we're composing emails or video
Right.
scripts, it's important to get that writing right. But in marketing specifically, why is it so important to get copywriting right?
Right. So obviously, like you said, when I'm doing copywriting for Harvest Growth, there's a bunch of different things that I'm doing. So for blog posts, for instance, when I'm writing for Harvest Growth and I'm writing these blog posts, like when somebody goes to Harvest Growth, they want to be finding information and they want to be finding valuable information that's easy to understand, well researched, that's correct information, and they can just be like, wow, I learned a lot from that. So instead of just, being like, okay, I'm going to write about this topic and I don't know that much about it, but I'll just kind of write about it and figure it out as I go. Well, that's an issue if you're not doing research beforehand. But if you prep for that blog post, you do research beforehand, you make sure that you know everything about it, you make sure that you're using language that everybody can understand, then when they look at that, then they'll be like, wow, Harvest Growth is a reputable company and that's awesome. And then for example, when you're working on Facebook ads for clients, when you are writing copy, that is what helps the consumers stop what they're doing, look at this ad and read it. And most of the time they're not watching the videos with sound. So that's why with Harvest Growth, we're a video company, we write a lot of stuff. So the combination of doing a really valuable video that they're probably not going to watch with sound, with short and sweet copy that's going to help them stop and be really interested in the product, along with the copy that goes along with that, is just so important. And then the next form of copy, they'll press on that, they'll see the website, and then if the website is full of typos, really hard to follow, hard to understand, then that they're going to X out immediately. So just little stuff like that, having this consistent message throughout all the copy that you write is so important.
Yeah, and I think you voiced it well. Where I always like to say you can recognize bad copywriting more easily than you can recognize
Right.
good copywriting, especially as a consumer, right? So as they're reading your blog post or your product description, if it's written poorly, whether it's typos or incorrect grammar or whatever, it really stands out, and it lends to decreases in credibility. Where you think like, is this a really legitimate company? Especially in the direct to consumer space, where oftentimes the website
Completely.
is the only interaction they have. So to build up that trust, it's about getting it right, and sometimes clear, concise, and simple is about it. But in your words, what makes good copy or good content?
So in my own words with that, I think that what makes good copy is, first of all, I think that I learned a lot. Like you said, like in college when I majored in English, a lot of the stuff that I did was research focused, and so I would be tasked with writing a 20-page research paper on. Trying to think of an example of a class I took that I went into and knew nothing about. I took an 18th century British literature class. Obviously, going into that, I knew nothing about that. So when I had to write research, when I had to write the paper, the first thing I did was do a lot of research. And when you're translating that into what my experience with writing for websites like AutoWise, a lot of the stuff that I started with AutoWise, I was like, I don't fully know what this is, but as a writer, I want always to spread accurate information, make sure that everything that I'm writing is backed up by so many people, because when you read stuff and when you post stuff, you're showing that to experts. So making sure that you sound like a human being, you're doing research. No one wants to read something that sounds like a robot. So I remember I learned something when I was working on buying guides at AutoWise, was that I'm not entirely sure what place was doing this, but there was something about how a large corporation was trying to make a way for like artificial intelligence to write buying guides, but they couldn't figure it out because when they were doing this, like a robot can't write these product descriptions because nobody wants to read something that sounds like a robot wrote it. So making sure that you sound human and sound personable on top of that is so important in every form of copy you do. So
That's a good way to put it. And I think I know you're not a gearhead by yourself. Like, so you don't know how to repair your own car, right? Like
Right.
one of our other employees, that's what he does that all the time on
Totally.
his own. So he probably knows, I would say, more about cars and all the details than you do. But that's something I want to bring up. I think it's so important for listeners to realize is you don't need to start off as an expert, right? You
Right.
do need to become that, right? You need to research and understand it, but
Completely.
research can help you get over that hurdle. And oftentimes, we might be an expert if we're marketing a product, for example, as speaking in the words of an inventor or an entrepreneur with their own product. They certainly are experts on that product, but they're not experts on their customer, for example, right? The end consumer. So doing that research might be the step that's necessary, but making sure that you truly are an expert, not just in your what you're selling, but also who you're selling to, I would say.
Oh, completely.
So one thing you've told me is that a good copywriter really helps the ideal customer consumer solve a specific problem or achieve a personal goal by going through this process. Can you walk us kind of through that process again? So how does a good copywriter really help their customers solve a problem?
Right. So when you're trying to release a product, you really want to make sure that you have a consistent message, like I was saying. And before you even do anything, before you even start writing website copy, before you start writing Facebook ads, you really need to figure out what your main features and benefits of that product is. So, something that we do at Harvest Growth when we take on any client is we're doing market research. Like that is the foundation of everything that we do. And in that, you're going directly to the consumer, figuring out, hey, this is what our product's about. This is what we are saying that we'll give to you. This is what we think the great features and benefits are. Here's a list of 15 features and benefits. Like, let me know what you think. Let's figure out what the important ones, let's figure out what, is the sweet spot for you of like when you hear about this product, what's that mean to you? And so when you're doing copy, something that I really like to do is I learned about this when I was taking some digital marketing lab courses a while ago, is when you're writing your copy, kind of think about what this consumer's life is like before the product, and then think about what the consumer's life will be like after the product. And this can be on a really small scale. So say that you're working on, a, something that a product that is going to help their grass grow. So this was an example that I learned about when I was taking digital marketer courses. Like before, their grass was gross. They were embarrassed about their house. They didn't like their lawn at all. And then after, they're enjoying their Saturdays outside. They're really proud of where they live and all of that stuff because of your product. So figuring out, what is it that you're selling to them that they're going to love? And then also when you're writing your copy, just knowing what your copy is selling, like what is it that, when you're writing the first hook of the copy and you're saying, what there's something called a pain benefit hook. So what is this? It's the same thing as before and after grid, where you're like, are you struggling with this? Well, here is our product and here's how we're placing it to make you see that like, this is the problem that it's going to solve and this is how it's going to do it.
Yeah, it's well said. And no, that goes back to the roots of infomercial marketing, where,
Right.
historically, kind of the quote unquote cheesy ads always start off with that black and white, over exaggerated problem and leading to a solution.
Right.
Have you ever had problems with, your grass getting brown or whatever, right? So it's
Yeah.
it's going into that problem first and addressing it. And that's often still done in these gadget or gizmo type as seen on TV campaigns, but not as much in digital, at least in a different way, right? So it's not going to be as in your face, but the problem and solution, I would say, still needs to be in your mind as a copywriter, or if you're writing scripts for videos, et cetera. The problem solution is really the core of what you're going after. Figuring out what your consumer's problem is, not what yours is, right? You came up with your invention for a certain reason,
Completely.
but consumers might want it for a different reason or have a slightly different problem. So that goes back to, as you said, researching and figuring that out with consumers directly. And you
Yes.
touched on
And
something else.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, and you'd be surprised about, you might be making this product and you might think that this feature is the number one feature. And then you go directly to the consumer to find out that they're like, no, this feature that you think is, mid feature, not that interesting. They'll look at it and be like, that's why I want that product.
Yeah.
So that kind of ties in with knowing who you're selling to, like knowing your exact target audience, knowing you can even do it down to the nitty gritty of like, what is the specific person that this would be the perfect product for, like even creating a really extensive buyer persona, figuring out like what do they care about in the day to day? Like what's their, what are they passionate about? What is their income? What's their age? What's their gender? Your product might market to a lot of different audiences, but kind of honing it down and figuring out like who exactly is this product for? And then when you're writing your copy, that makes it all the more personable and all the more, able to get them with what you're writing.
Yeah, very true. And something you touched on before as well is the kind of the difference between features and benefits. You worded it a little bit differently, but it's finding out what features are most important, but speaking to consumers in benefit language. So really how it's helping them. Past podcast guests we've had on the Harvest Growth podcast early on, and a good friend of mine, Bob Sarcosta, who's the original TV shopping host that's been on HSN for 40 plus years. We've taught a lot of courses together. And in his podcast interview, he reiterated a training that he talks about frequently, which is WizGat. What's so good about that? So when you talk about a
Right.
feature, drilling down, it's a really easy way to find out, okay, what are those benefits? So it's in many people's minds, it's, until you get it, once you get features and benefits, you get it. But it's almost like, taking calculus for the first time. It's until you turn that corner, it's hard to understand. And that's a great way to really dive deep on, okay, what's so good about that? In other words, what is the benefit for your consumer that they're going to take away from the feature that you're selling, one at a time, et cetera.
Totally. Yeah. And so, for example, a feature of a product would be, okay, we have this specific technology. And then the benefit would be like, the technology can do this. Like, why should you care that this has this technology? It's because it can benefit you in all of these amazing ways. So, really, going down, actually making a list of like, okay, here are my features for this product. Here's what I'm going to focus on in the copy that I'm writing. And here's the benefits that I'm going to be certain that I'm explaining to. Because when you're writing your copy, like you said, the client is the expert on the product. You've learned a lot about the product from the client, so you've become this expert on this product. But when you're writing this copy, you're writing copy for people that have no idea what this product is. You want to educate them and inform them, and you want to write to them as if this is the first time they're seeing it, because a lot of the time it is.
Very true. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about one of your big clients is Harvest Growth, right? So you work for us as a full-time employee, helping many of our clients, but also a lot of your work is for us as a company by itself. So we do something called, a lot of blogs, but also something called organic content. Can you first of all describe what that means for those in the audience that don't know when we say organic, what does it mean? And talk about why we do that. Why do we blog? Why do we write organic content? How is it helping us as a company?
Completely. So yeah, so organic content is anything that the specific company is releasing on their own, and it's not paid social media by any means. It's when you look at their website, that's their organic content. And when you press on, say that they have a section with a blog, and say it's a product where they need a lot of different how-tos, like how to use our product, how to use this for exercise, all of that kind of stuff. So, and then also, of course, their social media. So for Harvest Growth, it's the Harvest Growth LinkedIn, the Facebook, the Instagram, and the website. So it's really, really important because it helps build the credibility of the place that you're writing the organic social media for. And if you were to hear about Harvest Growth and then Google it, and the website looks like it was made by someone with their eyes closed and had no new information, then you would be like, is Harvest Growth still around? And so making sure that you have social media that you're posting constantly, and it's not just random posts with nothing of value. It's really important content where you're focusing on, okay, here's what we're about. I'm going to make a post showing about writing all about our process on when we're working on video shoots, and here's information of like why we are experts in the digital marketing sphere. Like, we know this, we're up with the times and all of that stuff, so that way when people are looking at your information, they know exactly what they're looking at.
And a lot of companies, they'll put their content on their main corporate website, which is one good solution for sure. You've helped us at Harvest Grow to develop a completely separate content-driven website, really in part because we're big believers in educating an audience. Whether or not someone becomes a client, we want them to succeed, right? We want
Completely.
product marketers to do better. That's what drives us as a company. And we love working
Right.
directly with them. But sometimes, it may be budget driven or other reasons that they're not ready yet. So for
Hmm.
that reason, we put together another site, infomercialmarketer.com, which you developed for us and looks great and has some really helpful content as well for anyone looking to get in the space of marketing their product or their service, their business online or on TV. So infomercials, that term is often thought of as these 30-minute infomercials or 2-minute infomercials that are on TV, on national TV. And we've done that for 15 years as a company. Everyone knows my background with OxyClean before that. But this is a little bit different. The term has kind of changed recently, where infomercials now refer a lot to. So we get a lot of people searching for infomercials and coming to us and saying, "Hey, I want to do an infomercial for Facebook or an infomercial for YouTube." It's not the correct way of saying it, right?
Right. Exactly.
That's why we term this way, because it's what people are saying. And at the end of the day, it's very similar, right? So we run the digital side of our business very similar to the TV side in terms of how we generate results, right? The videos are going to look different, right? One's going to be 2 minutes and widescreen, problem solution with a testimonial is kind of a very specific pattern for TV. And then the other might be a 15-second square video specifically for Facebook. So it's, again, the look and feel is going to be different, but the end goal of this style of video is to sell more products profitably, right? So
Right.
spend a dollar, whether it's on TV or digital, and generate multiple dollars in return. But so I encourage anybody listening to this, if you want to see some of Joybeth's work, go check out infomercialmarketer.com, and you can learn a lot as well from some great tips beyond what she's done already and is going to. We're going to talk some more about this as well, but specifically about how to market your business. That's a great resource to go to after you finish listening to this podcast too. So I'd like to shift gears again, and let's talk about the process. So again, for any listeners that are thinking about, okay, I need to sit down and write for a video or write the copy for their website or the product listing, whatever it might be, where do they start? What would you recommend as their process?
Right. So like I said before, when you're working with different clients, every starting point is different. And so with Harvest Growth specifically, we work with clients that just have the blueprint of their product and they're coming to us at the very beginning, or they are already on digital media, but they really want to go on national TV. And so with that being said, my process is different depending on the different clients and all that stuff. But with that said, the way that we do things at Harvest Growth is very much in unison with getting my creative wheels turning. So I've talked a lot about research, but that's because as a copywriter, that is my foundation and what I think is just so incredibly important. But the first thing that I do is that survey. And while that survey is only, it's usually 1 page, sometimes 2 pages for a little bit more of a complex product, but that becomes kind of the foundation for me for all my future documents. So in the same way, if you're starting out and you are really wanting to hone in on copywriting, that's really important to just have in whatever way, whatever form, have this foundation of here's what my product is all about, here's all these features and benefits, and then go from there. And so with that, you can have access to exactly what the consumers are thinking. And then from there, I can work on paid social media, organic social media, website copy, TV scripts, and everything else. And of course, the amazing thing about being with Harvest Growth is we're working with 25 clients at once, which is so exciting and fun as somebody who is a creative writer and wants to be writing about a million different things. So for me, whenever I get stuck, say I've been working nonstop, I'm working on this one client and I'm working on 20 pages of website copy, and I'm starting to be like, okay, I don't want to sound repetitive. I want this to be new and exciting. So I definitely will kind of take a step back, work on something else for a little while and let it rest for a little bit. That's really helpful for me. I know everyone always says, you're working on something, just walk away from it for a little bit and come back. But I mean, it really is helpful, because if you're sitting there losing your mind, start trying to figure out what to write about, you might start writing in circles or not writing as good as you want to be. So just really making sure that you give yourself space to take a step back. And then in that same process, we've talked about this earlier, but as a product launch agency, we're experts about everything marketing, but the clients are really the experts about their product. So reaching out to the clients, getting more information from them, and hopping on a call with them and being like, what are you learning about recently with your product? Do you have any new testimonials, or do you have any new angle that you want this product to be released for that you haven't really talked about before? So just really making sure that through the whole process, you're not getting lost in all the details, but you're really making sure that you remember, okay, this is what I'm writing about. This is what's exciting about it. And then making sure that everything that you're doing kind of translate that excitement through the writing.
That's very well said. I hear all this stuff and I think back to, starting this company many years ago and realizing how important content is and copywriting is. But in the early days, I felt like I had to do it all. And so
Right.
my wheels were spinning. I got stuck. And so that's why I'm so grateful to have you. I finally feel like, okay, I've got these 10 ideas and now Joybeth can help us get all those
Right.
done. Right.
Let's make
As
all
opposed
of
to
them
before.
real.
Yeah, exactly. Before I would get these 10 ideas and maybe they're all good, hopefully, but where do I start? Which one's the right one to begin with? So what's your advice? So you do a lot of copywriting, again, for us as well as for clients. If you're giving advice to an inventor, entrepreneur, product marketer that's listening, where should they get started? So they don't have time to do it all. So, is it blogs, organic, social media? Is it, website copy, LinkedIn posts? There's so many things you can do, video, blogs, that kind of stuff. So where would you get started if you were one of these new entrepreneurs or inventors?
Right. So the first thing that I would say is just really investing in your writing is so important, because I know we've talked about this before, but if I'm going to be reading something and I can't really understand or decipher what it said, and if it's full of typos, and even if it's, with writing, formatting is just as important as the words. So when you're writing, making sure that you have good separation, you have really powerful introduction that really leans people in, and then working on keeping their attention throughout and making sure that you have really valuable information. So I think that when you're working on your product, no matter what you do, making sure that you're really investing in your writing. And so, depending on what you're comfortable with, that might look a little different. So, if you're more comfortable with writing kind of short and sweet messages of like social media, doing something like that, then really focusing on getting a good organic social media presence. Making sure, one of my favorite things in this job that I'm doing right now is doing content calendars. So, prepping, for the month of April, I'm going to be doing 15 posts for this client. And I want to make sure that it's really different. Every post is different, but also it all has the same message and that it's capturing their attention continuously. And so, really preparing in advance and being mindful about what you're putting out there. Because if somebody goes to your social media and every caption is the same, then they're going to be pretty unimpressed and lose their attention quickly. But if they go onto your social media and see that you have written, here is how to use this product, here's testimonials, and here's how you can see them in a way that you can see that these customers love this and I have this written out for you. Here's an educational video about what's in our product, and you wrote out like everything that they need to know about that. So making sure that you really make sure that your writing throughout the whole process is really easy to understand in these short and sweet little messages. But if you are somebody who feels more comfortable writing long form, then making a really great blog on your website will be really awesome thing to invest in. And no matter what you do, whether it's long form on your blog, making sure your website is really, really honed in terms of the writing content, or if it's your organic social media presence, you think that your product would do really well on social media, then no matter what that is, making sure that you have this content regularly. So doing something as simple as, okay, I'm going to pull up a calendar on Excel and I'm going to make sure that I have 3 posts a week. I'm prepping for that in advance. I'm making sure that I'm proofreading it, checking it for typos, all of that stuff. And it's regular, 3 times a week, 15 posts a month. That's really a great place to start.
Yeah, like how you said, it's about what you like, right? And when you like a certain type of copywriting, you're more apt to do it. And that's so important because regular content posting, whatever the platform is, right? Whether it's your own blog on your website, Twitter, Facebook, you name it, it's about being regular and consistent. So you have an audience that can follow you, learn about you, your product, et cetera. So finding that form that definitely works for you and you're more apt to do it well, I think. So I'd love for you to share some tips and tricks with our audience. Do you have a kind of a summary for those that are listening and say, okay, I know what I want to write. I've got some basic guidelines. What's some general advice you can give them to write well?
Right. So I was thinking about, in the same way that attention spans are short, a lot of times when you're writing your content, you want to make sure that you are writing in a way that really captures attention fast. When it comes to when you're first starting out and you're trying to figure out, what can I do? What can I do to improve my writing content? It can feel pretty overwhelming. And you're like, where do I even start? What are the things that I should really focus on? So I kind of made a little bit of a list, because as a writer, I process things through writing. Everything that I do, I make sure that I write it out before I really think about it. So before you even begin to write, it's still important to do things. So I'll reiterate again, knowing your target audience, knowing your top 3 features and benefits, so important. And then knowing the specific problem your product solves. So basically having an elevator pitch. If somebody were to be like, okay, tell me in 1 minute everything about this product. Think about what you would say to convince them of this product. And then, like I said, throughout the whole process, researching, look at your competitors, learn all about your market. If you're looking to release a product in the automotive industry, then make sure that you know everything about what's going on in the automotive industry. Like, really take time to focus on that. And then once you start writing, I recommend downloading Grammarly Pro and getting a subscription to that, because that is such a game changer when you just make sure that it's not even just typos with Grammarly. It helps you rephrase sentences in a way that's really understandable to any crowd at all. And it helps you just really focus on your content and make sure that you don't have any things that would just turn away a customer really quickly. And then consistency is very, very, very important. So producing good content with intent and purpose behind everything that you do really regularly. And then something that I've learned a lot, and specifically marketing copywriting, is that clarity and simplicity over big impressive words is kind of the way to go. So as an English major, obviously I love words and I love really, really confusing words. And in poetry, I probably throw in words that are kind of, if you read that, you might be like, okay, I'm going to Google and figure out what that word actually means, because I'm not sure. But when you're writing marketing copywriting, it's doing that is not the thing to do. Making sure that you're using conversational words that are really easily understandable, like the first time reading it, that the customer can just read and understand quickly. That's really important. So making sure that the clarity and simplicity is great. So when you're writing it, if you have a really long sentence with all these complex words, cut that sentence in half and replace the complicated words with words that are, easily understand. And then, oh, sorry, what were you gonna say?
Go ahead. I was going to reiterate. I think that's so important to speak simply, right? Realizing your audience. It's tempting, especially as a new copywriter, to try to sound fancy, right?
Right.
To prove you're a good writer, but proving it is better actually when you're speaking simply, because everyone can understand that.
Completely. Yes, definitely. And even with, working on infomercialmarketer.com, that has been so fun to do. And I'm really, really proud of that website. And it's because working with you and everybody else at Harvest Growth. But of course, we know a lot about direct response marketing and infomercials, but this website is specifically for explaining every little thing about the ins and outs of infomercial marketing. So learning about, I'm not going to throw in this word DRTV, because what if somebody doesn't know what DRTV stands for? So like, what is direct response? Like, here's a paragraph about everything about direct response in a way that you'll understand, that anybody who has no idea what it is will understand. So that's just an example of, instead of just being like, we do DRTV marketing, somebody being like, what do you mean?
If I could add to that, I think that's a great point to bring up. One of the techniques that we do is, you're well versed in what we do. And sometimes it's hard for all of us to remember a time when we didn't know everything that we know,
Exactly.
right? We're experts in our
Yes.
field. So we always like to share, especially important pieces of content like that, with an audience that's new. So for us, we shared with a brand new employee that was new to Harvest Growth and was just learning everything, knew the basics, but to make sure it kind of all made sense to the layperson.
Right, definitely. And then another tip for when you're starting writing, making sure that your headlines or your first sentences are directly related to the problem that your product sells and the features and benefits is really, really important. So the first thing that you do is take a lot of time, for your website. Like, what is the first thing that this customer is going to see? Because when they see it, they're probably not thinking, oh, I think that a copywriter spent a lot of time coming up with those 3 words on the front of a website, but they did, so making sure that the short and sweet things are really, really great and honed in on is important. So, with Facebook or Instagram ads, sometimes all the person is going to see is that first sentence. So you really want to do it to where if they see just that first sentence, they'll click on the website, or they see that first sentence and they'll press see more and want to read more about your product. So making sure that that first sentence, the headlines are really, really, really great. And then finally, like I said, writing conversationally. I learned really quickly when I was doing a lot of buying guides. I was doing like 12 a month. And so sometimes halfway through the month was starting to just be nonstop writing. And suddenly I would maybe start to sound like a robot. And I remember I had an editor be like, hey, when you're proofreading, obviously proofreading is important, check for typos, but also read out loud what you write. You can be so wrapped up in typing away everything that you might just be like, oh, that was good. I'm going to just close my laptop and call it a day. But genuinely, I will be sitting we're working from home right now. I'll be sitting in my room reading out loud what I wrote, making sure that it sounds good. And often I'll read it out loud and then realize, oh, I need to change this small word. I need to change this sentence, rephrase it to where it makes sense. It sounds conversational because, we live in a social media world, and social media is more closer to conversation than, an email. So
that's great advice. And I think too, if you think about saying it out loud, that can be a great way to do content generation as well. So for many of them, of our listeners that may not feel like they're writers, it's a different, unique skill set, right? It's so important
right.
for all of us as business owners to push content out there, right? To get the word out about who we are, what we're doing, how we can help, all that kind of stuff. So content is so important. But if you're not a writer, that can be a good way to start as well. We've had some clients over the years that, especially for long form content, what they'll do is just speak, right? Record it
Mm-hmm.
and then get it transcribed. And that's something you could do on Fiverr, or there's softwares that'll do it. They can transcribe your
Yeah,
audio file, and you have to clean it up afterwards. But starting by speaking can be a way to clear that blockage. If some of us, sit down in front of a keyboard and it locks us up, right? If that's the case with you,
completely.
then it's
Yes.
a good way to start as well.
Yes, and that's why, it's so important when we're working with a client, the first thing that we do is have a call with them and be like, tell me everything about your product. And I'll be vigorously typing away like word for word what they're saying because it's important and it's conversational and they're speaking it out loud. And that's going to be awesome for me when I'm writing.
Well, I want to ask you in a second, if there's anything I didn't ask that you want to share with our audience that you think would be helpful. Before I do that, I do want to reiterate for our audience, we are here at Harvest Growth to help marketers, to help product inventors, entrepreneurs, product marketers to succeed. So, at a minimum, check out infomercialmarketer.com and learn about, okay, how do I do copywriting? A lot of this content that Joybeth shared in this podcast is available there, as well as a lot of other stuff of how to market your products. But if we can help in any way, whether it's with your organic social media, we do a lot of paid social media and then support it with organic. So paid meaning we pay to run ads to a specific audience, much like a TV campaign would be, but it's on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, et cetera. Again, the goal being, let's spend $1, get several dollars back in return. So make your advertising dollars work for you or make them profitable so you can really grow your business. So if we can help in any way, please reach out to us either at infomercialmarketer.com, again, to see a lot of the content, or you can find out more about us as a company at harvestgrowth.com. Even set up a meeting to talk with one of our team members to answer any specific questions you might have about your specific product or your marketing challenges you're going through. Joybeth,
Yes,
anything else
definitely.
that I didn't ask that you'd like to add?
I think we covered pretty much everything. This has been fun. I could talk about writing for hours, but can't talk
No,
forever.
that's right. We got to cut off at some point. But if anyone would like to talk more with Joybeth, again, just
Yes.
reach out to us. She's got an endless
Yes,
stream of
definitely.
knowledge that can be very helpful for everybody. So again, I encourage all the listeners, check us out at harvestgrowth.com or to see Joybeth's work at infomercialmarketer.com. It's infomercialmarketer.com to learn more. And also be sure to check out our podcast website, harvestgrowthpodcast.com. You'll see other episodes that we've recorded. And if you like this episode and you want to learn more about how you can profitably grow your consumer product business or your service business, please subscribe to our show and leave us a review at iTunes or Google Play. Thanks so much.